On today's show, the San Diego Padre that, dare I say, might have started it all, Mr. Manny Machado, taking a deep dive into his career over the last few years and a little bit of his Orioles tenure, talking about all of the big milestones he's achieved, what's made him such a great player, a potential Hall of Fame player, some of the drama, and projecting what he could do in 2025 and more. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Wednesday, March 19th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. You can follow me on Twitter /X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. Feel free to check me out on there. I know I've been a little bit quiet on the social medias lately, but don't worry. I'll be back with a vengeance once opening day comes around. But still, feel free to follow there and send me some questions to get answered every Monday here for the Monday Mailbag segment. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase, guys. Today's show is all about Mr. Manny Machado because some of you have really enjoyed the breakdowns I've been doing, mostly on the isolated kind of one player at a time sort of breakdowns, and it's been a lot of fun. And I think that there's a lot of stars on this Padres team, so it's quite easy to do these types of breakdowns, I think, on these players. So really excited about that. And Manny Machado is the one that, dare I say, absent Tatis, and even more so than Fernando Tatis Jr., probably has the most lore of like any player. Like, it's not easy to just talk about Manny Machado as just a ball player. It's not easy because there's been a lot of twists and turns. There's been some drama and what have you. And I think that while he is approaching, the age when your prime is gone, or I should say when your prime starts to wane, Manny Machado in a lot of ways hasn't shown none of the usual giant red flags that are like, oh no, this guy is going to become, Cody Bellinger, for those who don't remember when Cody Bellinger fell off. And Cody Bellinger did it at a younger age. Manny Machado, heading into his age 32 season, I have almost the utmost confidence in. And no, I don't care about his spring trading numbers right now that he's hitting 125. My guy does not care about spring trading. I think he's made that pretty evident over the years. Let's start, though, with before he was a Padre, which we haven't been doing on a lot of these episodes because, well, they've mostly been lifetime Padres. In Manny Machado's case, this guy was a superstar for a reason. And he kind of burst onto the scene very, very early. He was actually around the age when Eric Hosmer was being highly regarded as a prospect. A bunch of guys, the Lindor era, the Evan Longoria eras, and all that sort of stuff. And at age 19, making his debut for the Baltimore Orioles, and in 51 games, he looked pretty good at all things considered. Yes, he had a 97 WRC plus, but what I think really stuck out to people and what made him originally most famous is the glove. 7 defensive runs saved is very, very good for back then as a rookie. And I think that people were excited about Manny Machado, but it's very rare for guys to debut at this young of an age, right? And he absolutely thrived. And then in his second season with the Orioles, it was like, oh my God, this guy really is good. Yes, he only hits 14 home runs in 156 games, but remember, he's a 20-year-old, and most importantly, he puts up 5 wins above replacement because he puts together some of the most beautiful defensive highlights we have ever seen. Defensive runs saved, he had 27 that year, which is absolutely like a cheat code, frankly, but Manny Machado did do it. And I think that that's how I started to notice him. The amount of web gems back in the day when SportsCenter was a little bit more of a thing that I actually wanted to watch. Web gems always, I swear always, featured Manny Machado, and he was great for a reason. And he ends up winning a Gold Glove. He finishes top 10 in MVP voting as well in the American League with the Orioles at the time, kind of solidifying like this guy really, there's a reason he debuted so early. This is a superstar in the making. And then people might forget, got a little bit weird after that. He only plays in 82 games the following year, hits for a lot more power, 12 home runs, in fact. And in 2014, it's actually funny. I remember this being, he was like a top-level fantasy baseball sleeper. He was going in like the 70s or something like that. And I actually remember a friend of mine, I think he wanted to draft him. I forgot what happened. And he ended up being really, really good. The defense wasn't as otherworldly statistically, but it was still very, very good, right? He was a positive defender. I believe 5 defensive runs saved. But 12 home runs in 82 games, we started to see the power. And also, keep in mind, back then, there was a little bit of a power outage, I guess you could say, in Major League Baseball. Guys who were 2020 guys, it was not as common back then. I remember Ian Desmond being the type of player that was a top-level producer because you just knew he was going to hit you at least 20 home runs, steal 20 bags, hit for okay average, even if he struck out all the time and even if he didn't play great defense. Back then, there was a little bit more of a clamoring, a little bit more of a high price to pay for good offense. And this Orioles team, this Orioles squad, was a huge producer of that offense. Dare I say most of the offense, especially in the American League at the time. But 2014, he's injured, right? And I think people were starting to wonder, is this a little bit of an injury case guy? I hope not. Proves everyone wrong. Absolutely not. And basically ever since that season, 2014, when he only played 82 games and he was great in those 82, Manny Machado has been about the greatest sigil of health that you can see possibly in all of sports and especially Major League Baseball. The only player from 2015 onwards that has played in more games than Manny Machado is Paul Goldschmidt, by his grand score of 1,466 games to 1,446 games. Obviously, 2024 when he missed a little bit of time, that being right when he finally broke free of that. And I understand that that's not like a be-all and end-all statistic because obviously there's going to be very few players back then, right? The league changes, you get new rookies and whatnot, new stars. But if you want to narrow it to just 2019, since he started as a Padre, which we're going to get into, he's also up there in terms of most games played, right? So he's been amazing, and I think that overall, you've just kind of seen Manny Machado being as consistent a player as possible. And those Orioles teams were really fun. They were exciting. Right, he comes back in 2015, hits 35 bombs, officially cementing himself as a superstar in the league. 6.6 wins above replacement for Manny Machado that season. And where did he finish in MVP voting? Not all the way up there. Obviously, Manny Machado's never won an MVP, but he finished 4th. And I believe around this time is when the Josh Donaldson freak show stuff started going through. But the combination of him, Chris Davis, Adam Jones a little bit of a flawed player by I think some of today's metrics and standards, still the power was crazy. Mark Trumbo, Nelson Cruz at the time, right? Just amazing, amazing stuff for Manny Machado. And basically is one of those stars for years to come. The year after that, 5.7 wins above replacement. He hit 37 home runs. The guy was a freak. 135 WRC plus and then 131. And remember, he's only like 22, 23 years old here. That was the incredible part. And then he has a little bit of a down season in 2017, right? 102 WRC plus, only 1.7 wins above replacement. And if you guys are wondering, he played shortstop for part of that season, right? It was really weird. No one really knows why. He's not actually that great defensively as a shortstop. So if you see the WAR numbers, that's why. He wasn't very good at shortstop. And he got really unlucky. His weighted on base, there's actually a great article at Fangraphs from the time that kind of broke down like he was one of the more unlucky players like we'd seen in Major League Baseball in a while. And he turned it on in the second half. And even with the unlucky, even with his weighted on base numbers being nearly 40% lower, right, than his expected numbers, the guy still managed to hit 33 home runs. That's how I remember Manny Machado. He is a guy that's going to hit home runs even when he's having an unlucky season, even when he's hurt. He's going to get you nearly, if not eclipsing, 30 home runs every single season. That's basically what happens, and that's why he ends up getting the absolute massive contract from the Padres. And that leads us, of course, to the Padres era, which we're going to talk about in a second, guys. But first, we got to take a moment to talk to you, my dear listeners and viewers, about some of our sponsors. And folks, one of those sponsors is the always impeccable Supply House. We love Supply House very, very much on this show. Why wouldn't you? Because when it comes to all of your needs involving the plumbing, involving the HVAC or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need, delivered fast from coast to coast. And if you need help with that order, don't worry. Don't worry, Supply House. They offer expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person every time. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trademaster program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, discounts on every order. Sounds pretty good, right? Go check it out. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trademaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. And plus, one more thing. If you use the promo code SH5, you'll get a 5% discount on your first order. That's supplyhouse.com, guys. Go check it out. But we're not done. We're talking about the always impeccable, the always fantastic. Let me tell you about this one, folks. It is the return of our friends over at Game Time, guys. We've talked about Game Time a lot on this show before, and for good reason. They are fantastic. We love them very much because there's nothing better than catching an MLB game live, the crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd, the smell of the ballpark, food. And if you're going to go last minute, Game Time. This is why we love them. They make getting tickets easier than ever with last minute deals, all-in pricing, and a lowest price guaranteed. Game Time takes the stress out of buying MLB tickets. Plus, ticket prices actually drop as Game Time gets closer, meaning you can score an incredible deal. Maybe you and the friends, the happy hour ended early, and you're like, you know what? Let's go catch the Yankees. Let's go catch the Dodgers. Let's go catch the Padres. Let's go catch the Phillies. I don't know why I'm naming all these teams, but nonetheless, they always have great deals, guys. They are the official ticketing partner of Locked On, and as the Padres Braves is coming up, I can count on them to help grab tickets that meet my needs. Or, as someone on the East Coast, maybe I'll go to a Mets game, whatever it is. They have spontaneous game nights. They have Game Time picks features. They let you view the seats before you buy if you are a visual learner like myself. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed with Game Time. And just like that, everybody, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast. Let me tell you, folks, Manny Machado was an Oriole. It was basically a lot of sunshines and rainbows, you would think. Well, it wasn't exactly. And part of that is because, first of all, he was traded to the Los Angeles Dodgers. For those who don't remember that trade, it was a big one. He was the number one bat, obviously, on the market, and people were excited. The Dodgers getting themselves a big first baseman. And the Orioles got a bunch of prospects. Dean Kramer, Yosniel Diaz, Ryan Bannon, Breivik Valera, and Zach Pop. Oh, dear God, they got nothing, did they, right? The classic Dodgers special, let me tell you. Now, of course, the one difference here is that Manny Machado wasn't under contract. They didn't have many more years of control. In fact, just the half season. So give them a little bit of a break. This isn't as bad as the Wookiee trade because while none of those players they got in return ended up being anything, it wasn't like they gave up 3 more years of control and got nothing in return, right? The bottom line is that the Orioles were a really, really, really bad team, and they need to start resetting instead of paying a lot for one guy. Now, granted, they still could have done that, as is evidenced by the Padres. You can still pay for a superstar when your budget is your current payroll is like $20 million, right? And the Orioles, ever since Manny Machado, have had a problem with spending, right? Like much of Major League Baseball, frankly. But on top of getting traded to the Dodgers, where he did pretty okay, I think I would say, right? He did okay, at least in the regular season. In the playoffs, not so much. And we're going to talk about the playoffs later when we talk a little bit about some criticisms of Manny Machado. But in 2018, he ends up getting traded there with the Dodgers. He's still pretty effective, 825 OPS. A little bit down from his 963 he'd been posting with the Orioles, but still pretty good nonetheless. And this is where we got to talk about some of the drama, because that's how also Manny Machado became famous. On top of the fact that with the Dodgers, and he left them to sign with the division rival, so obviously they're going to hate him, justifiably so. It's all fun and games in this regard. He was also known for a lot of drama on the field, as many people will know, okay? On top of leaving the Dodgers, you have the stepping on Jesus Aguilar in 2018, back then with the Dodgers, right, at first base. The Josh Donaldson situation. If you guys haven't seen that video, it is when Josh Donaldson tagged him a certain way. Machado fell, then threw the helmet down at the ground right near him, and Donaldson's like, what the heck? You have many more incidents, including the Dustin Pedroia infamous one that ended up resulting in the end of Dustin Pedroia's career. Now, I'm not saying he went out of his way to hurt the guy in that regard, but I will say Dustin Pedroia was always, at that point, having a little bit of trouble with health, and he was super old, and I never found that slide all that malicious. That's the only one I'll kind of defend Manny for. But the others, the Donaldson one, the one with Jesus Aguilar, the one with the World Series stepping on Steve Pearce's ankle in the World Series, all that stuff was bad. Chris Sale, actually don't mind that one. right? It was in regards to the Dustin Pedroia one, but I actually think he was totally valid when he's like, why is it that he could throw at my head? But then if I bring the bat, you know what I mean? Like, that's a problem. And you know me, I've talked about it in written rules. I think pitchers are cowards half the time. Anybody can throw at anybody from 90 feet away when they have their whole teammates behind them to back them up. I just don't find that all that tough. But nonetheless, Machado was developing a reputation, and it was really earned. He was also developing a reputation because of his quote about saying he's no Johnny Hustle, famously. And my thing with that quote has always been this. I am fully okay, although I will defend the Pedroia thing a little bit, I'm fully okay with the reputation he earned as being a dirty player because it's there. There's a lot of stuff there. It's totally valid why people went that way. But when it comes to the Johnny Hustle thing, I don't care. You know why? Because what I told you guys in the first segment, there are very few players that have played more than him. It reminds me eerily similar of the situation in which Manny Machado in which Robinson Cano of the Yankees found himself in, where media was bashing on him because he didn't outrun ground balls. And it was like, you know that Robinson Cano literally plays every single game, right? I don't care if a guy who hits the ball as hard as Manny Machado does isn't running out hard hit ground balls to the shortstop. I'm not like, yeah, you run it out, but I'm not freaking out if he lollygags it a little bit because bottom line is he's there every day. So I will take that over, let's be honest, it's more fun. We like it. We love it. It's more fun than watching players who bust their butt down the line and then they mess up their hands and then they're out for 2 months. I prefer that over the guy who 99% of the time, the hard hit ground ball right to the shortstop that he didn't even have to use any range for, that he maybe jogs that one a little bit. I don't know. Call me crazy for that. But then, nonetheless, he is a Padre now. The big shocking news that broke the baseball world, I remember being in college at the time, and I just expected him to go to the Yankees because I made the mistake of thinking the Yankees still cared because they're the Yankees. But of course, he ends up signing with the Padres, and it was roasted in a lot of ways. I still remember being there because everyone's like, the Padres stink. All he did was go and sign for money, as if that's a problem, by the way. And that's kind of what he was criticized for. And Manny Machado signed that big contract, and it turned out maybe he knew a little something, right? 10 years, $300 million, absolutely blew up the industry. Everyone was like, what the heck happened here? And guess what? The Padres had a really good farm system. So maybe Manny was like, I'm going to sign here, but also I like the future of this team. And he ended up being right. Now, with his tenure as a Padre, let's start with 2019. Classic, vintage, timeless first new season, right? First season with a new team, down year, right? That's what happened in 2019. He did not produce nearly as much as what was hoped for, and that's where the roast came in, on top of, like I said, fairly being at that time especially known for his reputation. Like, that was still a number one thing for Machado. In 2019 with the Padres, he produced 2.5 wins above replacement, 109 WRC plus, and his defense wasn't particularly good. In 2019, he had 1 defensive run saved and was -6 outs above average. So a lot of people are like, what happened? Well, again, it was the first season with a new team. And on top of that, we've seen plenty of examples of this. Francisco Lindor being an excellent example. First year with the Mets. His difference was he was a very good defender still, but the offense just wasn't there. He was like a 240 hitter or whatever it was. I forgot what it was exactly, but the offense wasn't there. Everyone's like, why do we pay this guy so much? And Lindor didn't get it as bad just because Machado had the reputation, right? But one of the things we've seen is this is what happens. On top of being a new team with the first year of big new deal, it was a new league. American League to National League, whole new set of teams and whole new set of pitchers for him to get a little bit more acclimated to. So not a good season, but the whole Padres team was bad. He wasn't going to be able to turn it around himself. But what did I say in that segment? He always hits for power. A down year for Manny Machado, he still hit 32 home runs this season. Now, were they a little bit empty stats sometimes? Yes. He didn't really have his Padres moment. I know he had a couple of big games and, he had some moments, but he didn't have a moment where you're like, that's when he was a Padre. That's what 2020 was. He finally has his first true Padres moment. Frankly, I think he has a couple. Number one is just the fact that he was great in 2020 in a shortened game sample size, don't get me wrong, but he hit 304, the highest batting average of his career up to that point, with a 370 on base and a 580 slugging, 150 WRC plus for my guy that year, 2.7 wins above replacement. In just 60 games, he eclipsed his win mark from 2019 and in total hit 16 home runs. He was excellent. And has his first big Padres moment, the walk-off grand slam against the Rangers, a team that we're beefing with at the time, right? All that sort of stuff, the 3-0 situation. He knocks one out of the park. No one's in the fan base and all, no one's in the stands and all that, but still does that. And then also has a moment in the playoffs against the Cardinals specifically, where in game 2, with the Padres backs against the wall, we're like, no, this is their first good season in a while. Don't lose in the wild card game to this crummy Cardinals team. And what does he do? He has that big home run right after Tatis. He's pounding his chest. That's when he became a Padre. Let's blame it on the navy blue uniforms, frankly, because I really do think that up until that moment, he just didn't establish himself fully outside of like maybe his first career home run with the Padres. Other than that, that was it. But folks, that's not it. 2021 then came around, and 2021 was a solid season. It really was. I actually think it's a little bit underrated. In 2021, he hits 278, 347, 489, 123 WRC plus, 4.5 wins above replacement, 28 home runs. The problem is that 2021 was a mess of a season. That's the problem with 2021. The entire Padres team collapsed in the second half, and Machado didn't get like super hot for a prolonged period. He was still good. He had a month where he had 200 WRC plus, but he also had a 70 mark. He had a 90 mark. It just never quite stayed that way for a while where you knew what you were getting. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. Most notably just that the entire team cratered in the second half. But there's not much else to say with the 2021 season. He was solid. He was really solid. He delivered good defense, hit the home runs. It's just that he never had that like awesome stuff. And let me tell you, he would have the awesome stuff just right after that 2021 season, guys. And we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to talk about his overall skills and what I'm expecting for him in 2025 and if I think he could keep it up. But first, got to talk about one of our sponsors. And one of our sponsors, guys, it is our good friends, the recently, I should say, new good friends of the show over at Just Ingredients, because when it comes to your body, quality matters. And that's why Just Ingredients is changing the game with clean, high quality products designed to support better health and peak performance. Just Ingredients offers an NSF certified line of protein powder, electrolytes, pre-workout, and creatine, all rigorously tested to ensure they're free from substances banned by major athletic organizations. You don't want to get popped for anything. You don't want to do anything, illegal and whatnot. And guess what? Just Ingredients, they've also partnered with two-time MVP Bryce Harper. You might have heard of him, right? Kind of in the Manny Machado class, the tier of prospects and stars who trusts their NSF certified sports line to fuel his training and recovery. Clear and transparent ingredients, wholesome, nourishing stuff as well, without the artificial junk, fueling your performance. Grass-fed, whey protein, and pre-workout deliver real results. So visit justingredients.us and use code LOCKEDONMLB for 20% off. And for more wellness tips, follow at just.ingredients on Instagram. Go check it out.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
And just like that, everybody, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast. So it might have surprised you a little bit with that advertisement from our good friends at Locked On talking about the big old March Madness tournament. Go check it out, guys. Fill out your brackets, and you're going to want to listen to them as well. Gotta love March Madness, right? Who doesn't? Now, 2022 comes around. I was saying he didn't get hot. We're still waiting. We've had Manny Machado moments, but when is he going to have like the big moment? You know what I mean? Well, folks, he does. In 2022, 7.1 wins above replacement for our guy, Manny Machado. Finishing second in MVP. I have been on the record, and I've talked about this. I think he should have been the MVP that year. I think that when you consider how much the Padres needed him, heading into that season, no Fernando Tatis Jr. at the top of the game. The fact that there wasn't a Xander Bogaerts, Jake Cronenworth was good, but he was on the decline, right? You basically had Ha-Seong Kim and Jorge Alfaro and Luke Voigt trying to get hits for this team. You knew heading into the season he had to be the guy. And I know Paul Goldschmidt was great, not trying to take anything away, but Machado played a more premium position to providing more defensive value. He was excellent this year in his defense as well in 2022, right? Putting up an 8 above 8 outs above average mark. He was producing there, and they knew they needed him for the at-bat. He stepped up. He was really clutch that whole season. He was excellent. And on top of all that, my thing about this has always been, I am a big proponent of, if your other teammate is an MVP nominee, how are you the MVP? I'm sorry, you better put up a historic Aaron Judge-like season where you're a 10 wins above replacement player, because otherwise, I'm like, I don't get it. He had more WAR than Paul Goldschmidt, played the more premium position, and his team just needed him a lot more. I know the Cardinals weren't great that year, but even still, 32 home runs, hit 298, 152 WRC plus. I think he should have gotten the MVP, but maybe I'm biased. And then 2023 comes around. And this is where things get interesting, because the less we talk about 2023 as a season, the better. So we're not going to. In the context, it was a disaster class by the Padres, literally one of the least clutch teams of the last 25 years. But it was salvaged, his season, by some great defensive play. He only put up 3.4 wins above replacement. And by the way, this is also coming off in a contract extension. Instead of letting him test free agency, which, you know, we're not going to talk about that on this podcast. Instead of letting him test it, the Padres extend him for further, making him a Padre for life, pretty much, with an extension, 11 years, $350 million. Really cool, right? He's getting paid a lot of money, and deservedly so. I think that this season with the Padres, he struggled a lot. Only a 113 WRC plus. He still hit 30 home runs, which is just what he does. But the defensive stuff is really what kept him going, right? 4 defensive runs saved, 12 outs above average, his highest outs above average single season mark of his career. Amazing stuff. But he just wasn't overall very good. And the big thing that happened was he didn't produce in the clutch. But that was the entire team. So I don't want to harp on Machado too much. But there were some trends that we started to notice with Manny Machado that made me say, was his MVP season, did he sell out with just trying to make contact with the ball? Because what we saw in his MVP season, I'm going to call it just his MVP season, is he started swinging a whole lot more, especially outside the zone. And he made a lot of contact, which resulted in a higher batting average. He was putting the ball in play more. I think it was because he was being aggressive because they knew he needed him. But then, folks, you saw in 2023, things went down. And his hard hit rate went down too. My number one favorite advanced stat, right? Went down from 49% the year before to 2023, where it was 45. That's a little bit of a warning sign. He also was whiffing more and not walking nearly as much. So what happened? What's going on with Manny Machado? Well, if we are to believe what's been reported for the most part, is that he might have been hampered by injuries. Right? Like big time hampered by injuries. In 2024, let's just talk about that really, really quickly. He was quietly very, very good in 2024. And this is where I believe the underrated aspect of Manny Machado might be kicking in here, where yes, he was dreadful to begin the season, like actually dreadful, had like a below 60 WRC plus at one point, very, very bad. But he ended up still finishing with 29 home runs and a 3.6 wins above replacement because he kicked into gear later after recovering from his surgery. And I think that the 2023 season might be explained away a little bit by this injury. Because if you remember in 2023, Machado got his surgery at the end of the year when the team was fully officially out of the playoff contention. That's what they said he was going to do. So he was probably dealing with it for a lot earlier than when he ended up getting the surgery, and that might have impacted his season. You know why? Because we know in 2024, first coming out of it, what did he do as the season went along? In March and April, the guy was just, frankly, a disaster. 96 WRC plus, and then a 75 in May. What happened after that? 145, 132, 158, 133. Those are incredible numbers. 107 in the first half and 142 in the second half in total. We saw he was recovering from the injury. So you might be able to explain parts of 2023 and certainly a lot of 2024. And that was great. So here's my thing. He was hampered by injuries, right? According to all reports and according to just what he himself has said, right? And we know about all that. And he's getting up there in age, so that's not easy. So I'm expecting a big season because of what we saw last year. And the fact that overall, we still know he has the skills. He's going to be a pretty solid defender. He might not be the platinum glove winner that Nolan Arenado was once upon a time, for an example. A player that Padres fans love to complain about on Twitter, winning more gold gloves than him, which is weird, but whatever. But all in all, he's still going to be a positive defender. He wasn't incredible last year, 2 defensive runs saved, 0 outs above average. Year before, 4 and 12 respectively in those categories. But I still think he's going to be solid defensively. And I think that with what we saw him perform offensively last year as he was kind of recovering from the injury, it tells me that he's going to be great. There are still some things to keep an eye on, though. Make no mistake, right? His walk rate declining is an issue. Not a giant issue because he hits for a lot of power, and he makes up for it for the fact that he doesn't have a high strikeout rate. He's never had a strikeout rate higher than 20.7%. Like, he's still there. And actually, in 2024, his strikeout rate did go up, but not in a level that's freaking me out, 18.1 to 19.3. But his walk rate has steadily declined over the past few years. From 2020, it was 10.2%, then 9.8, 9.8, 8.3, and then 7% last year, right? And he is swinging a little bit more aggressively, not to the degree that he's Luis Ariz or anything, because again, he still hits for a lot of power. He makes up for the lack of Ks with power, but it's worth monitoring. He has an 11% walk rate versus lefties, only 5.8% against righties, which is a little bit odd. More ground balls as well versus righties. And in general, his little bit of a rise in his outside the zone swing percentage, basically chase rate. And he has a 4% decline in his outside contact rate. So he's chasing and missing a lot more, not walking as much. But again, I'm not freaking out. You know why? Because a lot of this stuff can be explained with injuries. And fundamentally, I don't care that much if you're striking out when you hit as much home runs and you play as good defense that Manny Machado does. It's okay. If his strikeout rate spiked to, let's say, it went from 18.1% to 24%, then you might be able to talk to me. And if you saw the home runs go down, then you can talk to me about saying maybe Machado is no longer a star, right? I'd be willing to listen to that argument. But for now, the little things, the whiff rate, the walk rate, I'm just not freaking out. I need to see more, because the last time he was fully healthy, the guy was carrying the team and he was one of the big superstars of the team last year. The only difference is that we're all watching Tatis, we're all watching whatever the heck Jurickson Profar ate that made him a superstar last year. And then, of course, the rise of Jackson Merrill. So I think, weirdly enough, Manny Machado a little bit underrated now. Just a little bit, because I think that he's so solid in every aspect of the game with the exception of speed, right, and base running and whatnot, that I think fundamentally we're looking at a player who's obviously going to be a Padres Hall of Famer. He now is the all-time Padres leader in home runs, but a general Hall of Famer in Manny Machado. And age 32, I'm just not freaking out just yet. Until I see everything that I just mentioned with the rise in whiff rate, lower walk rate, and maybe less power, then we can talk. But what I love about Manny Machado is even if that stuff happens, I think he's going to at least produce defensively. That's what's so great about him. Even if he becomes just a 25 home run guy, you see the power going down, I bet you he can still be a 250 hitter, get you a 330 on base, and play good defense, and that has a lot of value. And while it isn't superstar level, maybe that part is gone. I might be willing to listen to you on that. Is the MVP potential of Manny Machado gone? Maybe. We just have so many cracked players in Major League Baseball right now, and especially in the National League with Shohei Ohtani and Freddie Freeman, and Ellie De La Cruz is a freak. Ronald Acuna Jr. when he's healthy is a freak. There's a lot of guys out there. Fernando Tatis Jr., obviously. But in terms of being an all-star caliber player, I have not seen any reason to be scared. And let me tell you, I really think he's going to be one of those guys that we're just kind of like, I forgot about him. He's just always there. Yeah, there's some negatives. He still has a little bit of drama every now and then, right? He had the altercation with Tatis in 2021, right? Altercation as in the shouting match between the two, right? Like, that wasn't great, but not necessarily all on him. Maybe he was just trying to have a teaching moment. You had the Brusdar Graterol situation when he's yelling at him, and I'm like, well, we have unwritten rules are dumb, dude. We celebrate when we hit home runs. Graterol should be able to celebrate too, right? Some of the pieces following the 2023 season, right, when they were asking him about the locker room stuff. But again, I don't want to put that all on him either. Dave Roberts, yeah, that was drama, but that was 100% fabricated. So who cares about that, right? That was Dave Roberts kind of appealing to the stereotypical view of uneducated fans and people who aren't following the sport and just trying to go for the easy, low-hanging fruit. For a player who basically hasn't really had anything dirty or anything bad, basically since becoming a Padre, more or less, he's kind of been calmed down. He strikes me as a guy who's hitting his power. He's got spice, but he's not a hothead, right? He's the type of guy that's hitting for power and he wants to sit and have a glass of wine. You know what I mean? He's a dad now, all that stuff. Love Manny so much on this team, and I think he's going to have a great year. I'm putting him at like a 4.5 win player this season. I think he's going to be great, and I could see it be even better. Because again, when he was fully healthy last year, he was raking. He's got lineup protection. And overall, I think he just likes being in San Diego and being a Padre. So I'm really excited to see what he does going forward. But definitely, yes, keep a little bit of an eye on his walk rate and if he starts swinging a little bit wildly at stuff outside the zone. Don't think it'll be a big deal, but nonetheless, it is worth monitoring. But folks, with that all being said, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. Follow me on Twitter, again, /X, and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. Feel free to reach out to me on there for questions and comments you want answered for the mailbag show on Monday, the last mailbag before opening day, so that should be a good one. Don't let me down, listeners and viewers. Tomorrow's episode, probably doing a crossover with Millard Thomas, and then Friday, frankly, I do not know yet. Maybe doing another deep dive. Should we do one on Dylan Cease? I don't know. Message me. Do another deep dive into a certain player. Let me know which one you might want. But until that next time, stay safe, and of course, stay faithful. My Friar Faithful homies, take care.